Raider Nation. The Raiders are in full tension mode right now. A statement from Max Crosby after his response sparked rumors about a possible departure. Then, out of nowhere, a surprise defensive addition showed up, and the key detail is speed. On top of that, the latest intel around the top of the draft is heating up. There is also an analyst flat out predicting who will run the offense in 2026, and to close it out, a massive name could turn into a trap for the silver and black. The Raiders cannot afford to repeat the same mistakes in 2026, but before we dive into all of that, real quick here. Subscribe to the channel, it is free, and it helps this space grow in a big way. Drop a like as well, that pushes the video, so YouTube shows it to more people in silver and black. And jump into the comments. This channel only works with shared opinions, real debate, and the voice of Raiders fans spread everywhere. Here is the deal. The Max Crosby situation has turned into a pressure cooker. The team announced he is done for the rest of 2025, and it was not handled with that easygoing, no worries, just rest approach. You could feel the tension in the air. And when the biggest symbol of this defense is uncomfortable, the conversation hits a different level. First came the rumors. People started listing Team A, Team B, Team C, that whole talk about 5 possible destinations. You know how that goes. One spark and the internet goes up in flames. Then Crosby showed up on the radio on the show Let's Go with Jim Gray. He spoke calmly. He said he is putting in the work. He said he loves being around his teammates, but he never gave that clear "I am a Raider, and that is it" line that fans wanted to hear. That gap stayed open, and that is where the noise grows. To be completely honest with you, I get both sides, and it still annoys me. He is a football player. He wants to play. By most reports, he has been playing hurt since early in the season. That mindset is exactly what makes him Max Crosby. On the team side, though, there are scans, doctors, a knee getting worse, and surgery being discussed. There's also an ugly reality. The season fell apart, and every extra snap becomes an unnecessary risk. Adam Schefter jumped in and said that right now, the Raiders are not thinking about trading Crosby. The mindset is fixing the situation. I hope that is true because there is a big difference between protecting a player and losing the locker room. Crosby is the thermometer. If he is frustrated, everyone feels it, and when he says he has a lot of thoughts and emotions, that sounds like a warning, not a throwaway line. There was more too. Former Chief Executive Officer Amy Trask also cooled down the trade talk. She said she does not see him forcing his way out even because of relationships off the field. That is fine, but relationships alone do not win games. What wins games is a plan, respect, and straight talk. Pete Carroll said they are eye to eye and that Crosby is already back in the building. Good. Now comes the action. Not just hallway photos. The point is simple. If you want to turn the page to 2026 with hope, you cannot start the year fighting with the face of your defensive identity. Fix this fast. Explain the plan. Show that the silver and black has direction. And here's the question fans keep debating. Do you think this ends with a handshake or turns into an off-season soap opera? Talk to me in the comments because I want to feel where everyone stands. And hold on to this transition because while we argue about stars and tension, the Raiders also made a quiet but very interesting roster move heading into the final week. So here we go. In the middle of all this chaos, the Raiders signed defensive back Brandon Hill to the practice squad. It sounds minor, but late in the season, this is how you find useful players. The truth is, the roster has holes everywhere, and any new legs willing to hit get noticed. Hill comes from the Houston Texans program. He was a 7th-round pick in 2023. He stayed around that system for 3 seasons and then became available. The Raiders jumped on it. There is very little National Football League tape on him, just 2 games. Is that scary? A little. At the same time, this is the kind of low-risk bet that can turn into a special teams find, and special teams is where a lot of players carve out a role when nobody is watching. What stood out to me is speed. He ran a 4.43 40-yard dash before the draft, which is flying for a safety. There is also a fun connection. He played at Pitt and was teammates with Kenny Pickett. That does not guarantee anything, but it helps with quick chemistry, understanding routines, and walking into the locker room knowing someone. I like those small bridges. It feels like at least someone thought it through. Now, let's be fair about the context. It is very unlikely Hill steps in and plays meaningful snaps against the Chiefs, especially being on the practice squad. The team is also being extremely cautious with injuries. Veterans are banged up everywhere, and with only 1 game left, nobody wants to see a serious injury in a game that does not change change the season's outcome. Pete Carroll has been clear about that. He wants daily competition. He wants to see who shows up in practice, who wins reps, who ends up on the highlight board in meetings the next day. That is his style, almost like a football teacher. I get a nervous laugh out of it, but I understand the message. If you are rebuilding, you need to find out who can take the hits. Hill could be one of those guys, even if it is as a coverage player, a gunner, or a depth safety. Those players often turn into reserve or future contracts. Then minicamp comes, training camp comes, and the player is already in the system. On a roster that is going to change a lot, that matters more than people think. There is another angle too. Carroll said he wants to have fun in Week 18, playing Kansas City, lining up against Andy Reid, bringing energy to the game. I like that mindset because the team had been dragging, but fun without focus turns into embarrassment fast, and we all know how the Chiefs punish sloppy mistakes. So here is the tough question. Is this final game truly a lab, or does it become that accidental win that messes up the top of the draft? Because after what happened against the Giants, there are big lessons there, and that is exactly where this goes next. The loss to the Giants created two emotions fighting in your head. One side celebrates being close to the top of the draft. The other feels embarrassed by how the team played. And I will say it straight. That 34-10 game at Allegiant showed a lot of things that hurt to admit. It starts with Jackson Dart. He played like it was a practice session. He ran whenever he wanted. He threw with confidence. The Raiders' defense made him comfortable way too quickly. Without Max Crosby, the pass rush disappeared. Once that happens, the opposing offense settles in, and it is over. I was staring at the screen thinking, is this really happening? On the other side, the offense was completely stuck, and that looks even worse because the Giants' defense is not exactly elite. Still, they hunted the ball like it was a Black Friday sale. They jumped Geno Smith's throws and picked them off like they knew exactly where he was going. That is preparation on their side and disorganization on ours. It hurts, but that is the truth. And the run game? Ashton Jeanty got touches, but he was bottled up. In other games, he looked explosive. Here, he ran into a wall. Meanwhile, Tyrone Tracy Jr., a fifth-round pick on the other side, found lanes and gained more ground with fewer carries. That contrast is loud. It screams offensive line issues, adjustments, and which team was more ready to play basic football. What I cannot accept is how many rushing yards were allowed and how touchdowns came straight through the middle. It felt like everyone knew what was coming and nobody stopped it. There were flashes, though. Darian Porter broke up a huge pass in the red zone. Jonah Lalu popped on a few snaps and showed some presence up front. Those moments matter. When a season is bad, any young player showing hunger becomes a positive note. But then comes another frustration. Why does the offense not do the same with younger players? We saw Tyler Lockett scoring late in the season, while rookie Dante Thornton Jr. barely got targets. I am not saying to bench the veteran completely. I am saying I want to see who could be part of the future. If the team is losing, use that time to learn, not to replay the same script. The bottom line is harsh. The Raiders made the Giants look like a more organized team, and that does not get fixed by a single high draft pick. It requires changes in how the team plays, prepares, and makes decisions. So let me ask you directly, what bothered you the most in that game? The defense with no answer or the lifeless offense? Let me know in the comments because this debate matters. And hang on, because big voices are openly talking about the name the Raiders supposedly won at the top of the draft, and that story feels like one that will split the fan base. One comment landed like a bomb after the Giants game. CBS analyst Pete Prisco basically said the Raiders are targeting quarterback Fernando Mendoza with the top pick. He did not sugarcoat it. He said they sat important players, they wanted to lose, they wanted the number one pick. That is tough to hear, and it hits harder because deep down, a lot of people in silver and black think the same thing. The situation is straightforward. The Raiders entered that week tied with the Giants for the worst record. Then came midweek decisions. Brock Bowers was shut down, Max Crosby was shut down, Jeremy Chin was shut down. It was not just rest, it felt deliberate. The result was the Giants walking in and cruising. Then Prisco said the team is happy with the top spot and believes it will fix the quarterback problem with Mendoza. I heard that and felt torn. There is logic there. You do not build a future on speeches alone. You need someone who can change the offense. If the front office truly believes Mendoza is that guy, fine. But there is real danger here. When decisions look like tanking, player pride takes a hit. The locker room feels it. Fans feel it. The entire league talks about it. And we all know how much people love to clown the Raiders. This circles back to Crosby again. The narrative of sitting stars is not neutral. It hits hardest on players who live to compete. Jay Glazer said on Fox that Crosby did not accept being pulled from the final games, that he has been playing through a knee issue since week 3, and that shutting it down is not in his mindset. That attitude is why he is respected, but it also creates friction when the team wants to protect an asset while thinking about draft position. This situation cannot be dragged out. If you are taking a quarterback at the top, you need to enter 2026 with the locker room fully on board. No resentment, no feeling of being taken off the field to lose. Pete Carroll said Crosby is back in the building and that they are aligned. Hopefully, that is real alignment, not just smiling at a press conference. Alignment means hard conversations and a clear plan. As for Fernando Mendoza, here is something people avoid saying. Once his name is out there publicly, the pressure doubles. Fans will judge him before he ever wears the shield, and that can be unfair. The Raiders have to be smart. If it is him, commit fully. If it is not, stop feeding certainty. Hold tight, because another name just entered the conversation, and it always lights up timelines: Trevon Diggs. And this opens a much bigger question about what kind of team the Raiders want to build. Brace yourself, because Trevon Diggs is that name that always sparks debate. The Cowboys decided to waive him with 1 game left in the season, and immediately people started saying the Raiders should grab him. From my perspective, that is a late season temptation that can turn into a January headache. Yes, the secondary needs help. Everyone knows that. But a thin roster does not mean you grab every piece that falls off the truck. Diggs had real impact seasons in 2021 and 2022 when he looked like a turnover magnet. That conversation has changed. The way Dallas let him go says a lot. Start with the money. The Cowboys are tight against the cap and need flexibility for 2026. That happens. But it was not just finances. When a team cuts a name like that with a week left, it smells like relationship fatigue. The Raiders already have a locker room that will be shaken up this offseason. Importing more noise is the last thing they need. Then there is the simplest point for anyone watching every Sunday: availability. Over the past 3 seasons, Diggs has played in just 21 games. For a team trying to rebuild, investing in someone who lives on the injury report is a gamble in the dark. Fans in silver and black have seen that movie before, and it usually ends with "if only he stayed healthy." Now look at the contract. Claiming Diggs would mean a base salary of $14.5 million next season, with a potential dead cap hit of $18.4 million. That is a lot of money for someone who is currently more of a recognizable name than a sure thing on the field. With that kind of cash, you need someone who shows up every week and stays out of off-field headlines. This is not about hate, it is about fit and priorities. General Manager John Spytek has to pick his battles. He needs to address the line, the quarterback spot, and overall depth all at once. Spending big on a corner with declining play and recent injury history kills flexibility, and flexibility is what saves an offseason for a struggling team. If you are targeting the position, a cleaner path makes more sense. Smaller contract, lower risk, someone who comes in to compete and stays available. Eric Stokes was even mentioned as a cheaper example. That is the mindset. The Raiders do not need to turn trash into treasure. They need to build a foundation with reliable players and stop chasing old shine. And that leads straight into what comes next, because everything discussed today points to one truth: the next move will define this team's identity. You can feel it. The Raiders are at a real crossroads. Max Crosby has become the measuring stick for everything. If that relationship fractures, 2026 starts with smoke in the locker room. At the same time, the team is making small moves like bringing in Brandon Hill, trying to find cheap, hungry pieces. That is what rebuilding actually looks like. But rebuilding also demands identity. Then you look at the Giants game and it dumps cold water on the whole thing. It was not just a loss. It was a loss that looked disorganized, and that does not get fixed by the number 1 pick alone. You need structure. You need an offensive plan that makes sense. You need a defense that does not collapse when one star is missing. When Pete Prisco speaks loudly about Fernando Mendoza, it puts a massive spotlight on the next step. If it is him, he arrives with savior pressure. If it is not, the Raiders will have to explain why the top pick went another direction. Either way, fans in silver and black deserve clarity, not vague talk. And with the idea of interest in Trevon Diggs floating around, it becomes even clearer that this offseason will be full of bait. Big names, heavy contracts, promises of returning to old form. The Raiders cannot live on nostalgia or expensive gambles anymore. They have to stop collecting problems disguised as solutions. They need players who are available, who contribute, and who buy into the project. I will put a bold statement on it. 2026 will depend less on one single name and more on how this team handles culture. who stays, who arrives, who leads, and what the locker room rules are. If that clicks, the high draft pick becomes fuel. If it does not, it becomes another sad chapter on the shelf. Drop your thoughts, because this space belongs to everyone who lives and breathes Raiders football. Just win, baby, and let the next decision be real, not just a flashy headline.